So I'm sure other people have noticed this too, but house music has started to change a lot in the past year or so. And I think the biggest change is in the drums. There's a lot of 80s influence in the drums from artists like Madonna. So I want to break down where these drums are coming from, how they're being used today, and then we'll actually make a drum beat with this 80s influence, and then at the end we'll put a more modern twist onto it. So everyone knows the most famous sound that came out of the 80s, that big gated snare sound. And you can dance. So artists like Madonna use this all the time. Then maybe the most famous example of this of all time is I Wanna Dance with Somebody. So 80s. But these drums are having a huge influence on today's house music, and it's not just the big gated snare, it's also like the hi-hats on the downbeat and the shakers and the percussion, which we'll get into. I've got one more example though. The original version of this track is from '86. I love this tune. But we can hear how these drums are making a huge comeback today, like this track released in August this year. It's got that big gated snare, hi-hats on the downbeat. Then Prospa, who are some of my favorite producers right now, have a lot of 80s influence in their drums. Then there's a lot of examples out there where there's a more modern twist on these 80s drums where they make the drums tighter and the samples are a bit more modern. Light me up. So similar drum beat, just tighter overall sound. And then here's the last example I'll give before we start making our own drum beat. Get up now, can't wait your turn. London's on fire while Paris burns. Really tight. So let's actually build a drum beat using these ideas. So I'm gonna start with more of an 80s influence and we'll make a gated snare, and then we'll put a more modern twist on it at the end. So for the snare, let's start with a bit of a more organic sounding snare sample. Then we really wanna just compress the shit out of this to bring out the tail of this snare. Then the first big key to getting this 80s sound is opening up a reverb, but putting it in non-linear mode. And in this mode, the decay actually does nothing. We're gonna control the decay with the size. And we actually want it to be really bright. Then just to control that sound, you gotta add a noise gate at the end, but I'm gonna sidechain it back to the original snare sample. So a noise gate just lets everything above a certain threshold come through, and everything below a certain threshold cuts out. So if I move the threshold up a lot, and then the hold kind of becomes like the release of the sample. So you can mess around with those settings more as the snare plays in your full track. So it's kind of interesting to see how we go from a normal snare sample, then the compressed version to bring out the tail, and then with that non-linear reverb on it, and then controlled with the gate. But these gated snare samples tend to not sound that great by themselves, so you really want some clap samples layered on there. Then one of the biggest changes I've noticed in house music recently is people have been replacing that classic upbeat 909 hi-hat with closed hi-hats that are more focused on like the downbeat. And that's coming straight from those 80s tracks I showed you. They don't have that upbeat hat. Their hats are more focused on the downbeat, and they also add some shakers in there for the groove. Then let's add in this bass line. Then I'll add back in the kick, the gated snare, and just a pad sound, and then we'll do a more modern twist on this. Then with the more modern twist on this, instead of having the huge gate on the snare and like the loose sounding drums like this, then the modern twist on this has a lot tighter samples. So if we swap those into our track, it all sounds a little punchier. Then the only other difference is some of these really modern variations might have a lot more technical percussion like this. And because you've watched this far, I'll give you the stems from these drum beats for free. And I've also made a folder of these gated snares. I'll put all that in a free download link below. Thank you guys for watching. As always, I do mix people's music. If you're interested, I have sound packs. You can check all that out at bigsystudios.com, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.